Rocky's Revelation.
Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode. It is Monday, November 17th, 2025. I hope everybody had a good weekend. We got over 40 headlines to get through today, so we're going to get right to it. We're going to start out with the fact that Trump U-turns again on the Epstein file release. And we're also going to talk a little bit about John Fetterman and his surprising injury. Did he fall down? Was he attacked? We recently heard about a attacker trying to get at Alina Habba, who's the acting attorney general, district attorney for Pennsylvania, I think Philadelphia. So President Donald Trump changes his stance again on the Epstein files. This time he's got receipts about Democrat and liberal involvement with Epstein. Obviously, it's going to center on Bill Clinton, and that's where this whole thing began over 20 years ago, about 20 years ago. And the thing about John Fetterman is John Fetterman, who was critical of the Democrats during the shutdown and even beforehand, will his position change? That's really what we're going to be looking at, because he was doing the talk circuit. He was on many, even Fox News, he was on many news channels talking about how much the Democrats suck and how their approach to politics is really divisive and really violent. So we're going to get into that as well. So why don't we get into the headlines and read the news? First headline up today is from the Wall Street Journal. Trump implements major rollback on food tariffs. President moves lower duties on beef, coffee, and dozens of other goods as cost of living concerns rise. Now, I want to draw a contrast here between the Wall Street Journal headline and the next headline here from Reuters. You see, the Wall Street Journal headline was Trump implements major rollback on food tariffs as cost of living concerns rise. Now, it's not in cost of living rising in certain sectors is not inflation. And that's really the problem with what's going on here, because what we see with the Wall Street Journal compared to Reuters, Trump cuts tariffs on beef, coffee, and other foods as inflation concerns mount. Now, I just want to address this a little bit here, is that tariffs aren't inflationary, depending what sectors the tariffs are targeting, what countries the tariffs are targeting. Prices in those sectors could rise. Inflation is really a broad-based, that's why they call it inflation, that all costs rise. So many economists know that, but still people like Reuters talk about inflation. Tariffs aren't inflationary. Can they raise costs on the consumer? They can raise costs on the consumer. But what we've seen with China in the past is that they lower their prices, so the prices, despite the tariffs, are still lower than their competitors. The reason for tariffs is to drive people to purchase different goods and hurt the exporter, which is China. And this is the thing. They're like, oh, it's a tax on Americans. Maybe if the importer is American, but a lot of times the exporter, the exporting country, is importing those goods as well. So they have a affiliated group, like China often has Chinese businesses in the United States that import those goods. Are there cases where there are American businesses importing from China? Of course there are. Still not a direct tax on Americans. So Reuters says it's inflationary. What it is doing is targeting food costs, obviously. And that's important. Tariff rollback includes beef, tomatoes, bananas amid inflation concerns. Again, Reuters has to reiterate inflation, even though it's not inflationary. Trade deals with Argentina, Ecuador, Guatemala, El Salvador to eliminate tariffs. Democrats criticize Trump for inflation-linked to tariffs. So Reuters used inflation 3 times, and we're not even into the lead. So let's see in the lead if they say inflation again. No, but they use it in the second paragraph, which gets to show you where the propaganda is. If you have to keep using the same term over and over again, it's called psychic driving. It's a propaganda thing. So it's a gaslight of sorts, but I'm not going to get into that too much. So what we're talking about today is the cuts on foods, which is good because what you want from a government is it to be responsive. So if the people are saying, hey, my bananas are cost too much and I like bananas, and then the government says, all right, I'm going to do something to address that, that's a good thing. So they've already rolled back tariffs on beef, particularly for Argentina and Brazil. That's good because the beef shortages, manufactured scarcity here in this country, I mean, they're not culling cattle or anything, but that's the problem when you leave sources, whether domestic or otherwise. If you're relying just on one source, then that one source could cut production and drive up prices. So Trump is actually undermining the American beef industry to provide you with cheaper beef. So he doesn't have a problem with the consumer. He's just trying to reduce the trade deficit. And people talk all the time about, oh, tariffs, I don't like tariffs. You know, obviously big corporations don't like tariffs because most of the importers are big corporations. But they don't talk at all. They have whole news stories about that, and they don't talk at all about the trade deficit and how that hurts Americans as well. So then they have this Federalist article here from actually Peter Navarro. If you don't know, Peter Navarro is a counsel to the president, particularly on trade. And so the tariff war, the trade war, is Peter Navarro's idea. So if Trump had the power to ban trade sanctions, then he has the power to moderate it through tariffs. And he goes through, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because he goes through the basics of the argument that's in front of the Supreme Court right now. Tariffs are the most flexible, peaceful, and effective policy instrument to regulate importation. That's the economic, diplomatic, and common sense context of the Supreme Court, as the Supreme Court considers whether presidents have the authority to use tariffs under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Now, a lot of people might say, what do you mean international emergency? The trade deficit makes it so that it's an international emergency. The plaintiffs assert that the IEEPA can't be stretched to include tariffs because although the IEEPA empowers the president to regulate importation of property in an emergency, it makes no mention of the word tariff. Well, it doesn't have to. And Navarro goes on to say that, where the court explicitly rejected the proposition that Congress, when delegating specific authorities, needs to state its intent in a particular way or use magic words, tariff, in the same manner. And he's talking about legislation. In the same manner for the IEEPA, Congress need not use any particular vocabulary. And he mentions tariff, duty, or tax to delegate those powers. Context and purpose suffice. In this context, Congress's aim was to arm the president with an expansive list of emergency economic weapons, not to catalog every tool by name. Oral arguments earlier this month explored the plaintiff's logic gap. The logic gap. How could a president bar all imports but not impose even a 1% tariff? I mean, it's ridiculous. The government's answer to regulate importation must naturally include tariffs because tariff is the quintessential means of controlling imports, period. Right? All right. Argument over for now. You might not believe Peter Navarro or arguing the case, but he is the expert on trade. Let's move on to the next story. The New York Post, Marjorie Taylor Greene insists she still supports Trump while repeatedly slamming him in a bonkers interview on the Epstein, after Epstein fight. She went on an interview. I'm not going to play any of the interview, and I'm not going to go into any of the quotes from the interview. It doesn't matter. You know Marjorie Taylor Greene. You know how she is. But she still supports Trump. But the point being is that Donald Trump promised to release the Epstein files, and then he went back on his promise. And we hate when politicians do that. And so we thought it was going to be a little bit of a change of the way things are done in Washington, and whether or not, politicians promise things to get elected and then they back off them. We didn't want that from Trump. He said he wasn't going to do that, but he did. And we know why, right? It's because donors are involved. It's not because Trump himself is involved. Is he? Maybe. I don't know. I know we know sort of the story of the relationship between Trump and Epstein. Right? So, I don't know. Did he diddle young women, young girls? Or I would say they're not really preteen. They were young teenagers, pubescent girls, I guess you could say. In any case, was he diddling girls? I don't know. Is there my take on it is because where the first U-turn came for Trump was after Patel found Epstein evidence in this burn bag, and then some of it was leaked to the Wall Street Journal. Supposedly this birthday card was leaked from Ghislaine Maxwell, leaked it to the FBI, and then or leaked it to the Wall Street Journal or so. And Trump denied that was him. And certainly that birthday card was out of character for Trump. If you look at it, we could, dissect it in a bunch of different ways. But the Wall Street Journal has the headline, Trump calls for an investigation into Democrats named in Epstein emails. President says he will ask Justice Department and FBI to probe Epstein's relationships with Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, and Reid Hoffman. And then PJ Media has the headline, sorry Dems, the Epstein emails vindicate Trump. I'm sure they do. But the headline this morning was Trump and GOP make a major U-turn and vote for disclosing all the Epstein email files. Which we'd like to see. I mean, the FBI was on Epstein Island taking out boxes and boxes of things. We need the files. We just don't need emails or some sort of dribbling out of evidence. The guy's dead, right? See, this is why people die in instances like this, whether they really die or they fake their death or whatever. Because without a trial, there's no public disclosure of investigation evidence. So he dies, and the Epstein files get stored away in an FBI vault somewhere. So here, he wants to release all the files. It's all the investigatory files. Let's see them. What do they say? Who do they implicate? Realistically, I think that we will never get to the bottom of this. It's just there are too many rich individuals are involved, and these are the elite that control everything, that control governments, that control particularly the intelligence agencies worldwide, and the allies of our intelligence agencies. It's all together. There's no definition of American elite or German elite or British elite. It's all the elite. They have no boundaries. They have no need for sovereignty, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's the same thing with the intelligence agencies. The Club of Berne made it perfectly clear that all the intelligence agencies are aligned, all right, to do the bidding of the international elite. All right, let's move on. The Wall Street Journal: immigration crackdown intensifies in Charlotte, North Carolina. North Carolina's biggest city is the latest focus of federal enforcement surge, and that's what they do. They flood the zone, and there's nowhere for these guys to run. So as they draw down one operation, the one in Illinois, they're going to draw down from that, and then they surge their efforts and their resources, assets into a different city. So One American News has the headline: Border Patrol arrests 81 illegal aliens on first day of operations in North Carolina. Department of Homeland Security revealed the approximately 1,400 immigration and customs enforcement detainers across North Carolina were not being honored, according to the allowing illegal aliens to roam back onto North Carolina streets because of sanctuary policies. This is the problem, and this is why they act with such surprise, like a sneak attack, because they don't want the sanctuary cities and states to start emptying their jails of illegal immigrants who have committed crimes. But they do. And so some of the politicians there, and this is a problem with legislators, state legislators, that you have this sort of like, we're going to tell you what's up. You're there to make laws, right? And for you as a lawmaker to say, we're going to disregard the law, disregard the supremacy clause of the United States, and obfuscate information and obstruct federal law enforcement, I think these people should go to jail. So anyway, one of the U.S. Congress people in North Carolina, Alma Adams, issued a statement calling the immigration raids extremely concerning. So the funny thing is here, she says, tear gassing peaceful protesters. That's what ICE does, yeah. Those tactics and values have no place in a city of Charlotte. And she prefaced it by saying, everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, and what we have seen on the Border Patrol and ICE do in places like Chicago and Los Angeles, using excessive force in their operations and tear gassing peaceful protesters. Wait. And then Bovino, because she states, Charlotte's immigrant community is not the same of the illegal immigrant community. Bovino, who is an ICE or Department of Homeland Security representative, says she needs to learn the difference between a legal alien and an immigrant. Immigrant is here legally. But wait, there's more, because he says our agents arrested in this Honduran illegal alien with a violent, one of these people was a Honduran illegal alien with a violent criminal history, multiple simple assaults, shoplifting, and aggravated felony assault that put him behind bars for 4 years. This is why border security matters. This is why we're in Charlotte. So who's at the same grocery store with you? This illegal alien from Honduras with a criminal history. He has arrests for aggravated assault, weapon charges, DUI. He's also been removed from the U.S. twice, so he's here again. He committed a felony by re-entering the U.S. Indeed. So we're not talking about the immigrant community. We're talking about the illegal immigrant community, particularly criminals within the illegal immigrant community. And although Alba said that it was peaceful protests in Chicago and Los Angeles. Fox News brings the receipts. Anti-ICE protesters turned violent outside Chicago facility. 21 arrested after clashes with clash injures 4 officers. This is back from the 14th. Demonstrators blocked traffic and refused to orders to disperse, the authorities said. So there you go, Alba. It's not peaceful protesters. As we've seen time and time again, you just got to look at the footage. They're not people standing out there with signs. They're people that are obstructing federal law enforcement. That's a crime, right? They're getting in their way, getting in their face, and sometimes hurling objects at them. That's assault. Or hitting them with a sandwich. That's also assault. So it's not peaceful protest. Unless assassinating Charlie Kirk is your form of peaceful protest. So let's move on to John Fetterman. I'm not going to get too much into this. We kind of know what happened there. His staff says he suffered an arrhythmia that caused him to pass out, and how you would pass out and hit your face. Even if you pass out, even if you lose consciousness, usually your knees go out and you kind of go down that way. Your knees give and you kind of go down like this. And then fall over, right? Or if you feel yourself losing consciousness and losing your balance, you put your hands out. That's a normal reflex, even if you're not fully conscious. Your normal reflex is the normal body reflex is not to just face plant. So unless he like hit a mailbox or something when he was walking, I want an explanation from his staff or whomever, or of how he is injured nowhere else on his body, just his face. You're saying that, right? You're saying that he's walking and they're just like, not his knees. His knees don't get hurt or scratched or anything. Just his face, he topples over so his face plants on something. Right? That looks like, I knew I had a bunch of friends who did mountain biking. That looks like a mountain biking accident where you hit the brakes or the bike stops and you fly forward. Or, maybe if you were running, you could have that type of accident. But it looks like he got hit in the face with a shovel. Like, it looks like he was walking, and someone was behind a tree and just like, wham. And if he lost consciousness, if he doesn't remember anything about the incident, they just make up a story, right? Because they just what do they discover him, or he regains consciousness and makes it back home, and he goes, I don't know what the fuck happened. Well, we got to say something, right? We can't say that somebody snuck up on you and hit you in the face with a shovel or a baseball bat. You know the story. Fetterman was hospitalized on Thursday after taking a fall during a morning walk. A spokesperson for his team said that he suffered a flare-up of ventricular fibrillation that made him feel lightheaded. Doesn't explain the injuries. 20 stitches later, in a full recovery, I'm back home with Giselle, says Fetterman and the kids. The senator posted on his X account showing off a smiling photo with his battle scar. Stitches stretching from brow to nose. Right. It is indeed a battle scar. Show you the picture. Weird. The top of his head, not his chin, right? Just the top of his head. It actually looks like the shape of an end of a shovel. Weird. But I'm just speculating. I don't. Could have just been a fall, but for me, timing is always suspect. The guy's out on the talk circuit. bad-mouthing Democrats, right? And then all of a sudden this happens. Doesn't add up. So I mentioned this attack on Alina Habba. So Fox News has the headline, FBI arrests suspect in attack. On U.S. Attorney Alina Habba's office, a federal arrest warrant was issued for Keith Michael Lisa. And he's been apprehended, I believe. Hold on a second here. I know I have the text for this story because I just wanted to reiterate what happened here. See if I can find it really quickly. So this guy showed up at her office with a baseball bat and found it. The guy showed up at her house with a baseball bat. Her house, excuse me. Her office, right? Keith Michael Lisa. Okay, the FBI said Lisa, when I first read it, I'm like, is this the same guy? The FBI said Lisa was wanted for allegedly entering the Peter W. Rondino Federal Building in Newark, New Jersey on November 12, 2025, while in possession of a bat. He had a baseball bat with him. After being denied entry, he discarded the bat and returned. Once inside the building, and I guess they let him in, he proceeded to the U.S. Attorney's office where he damaged government property. So he pitched a fit there in the office and started destroying shit, apparently a printer, and started throwing shit around. I guess his idea was to smash up the office with a baseball bat. My problem is, if security turned the guy away with a baseball bat, and then he came back without it, you're like, oh, you're good. Yeah, Alina Habba's office. Yeah, 5th floor. One American News, Secretary Rollins, right? So she is the Agricultural Department Secretary, which controls SNAP, says SNAP fraud is out of control. 108,000 dead people still listed as receiving benefits. Of course. Any give out is giveaway is going to be ripe for fraud. Anytime they're giving out free money where you don't have to do anything for it, people are going to act fraudulently to get that money. Whether they deserve SNAP, don't deserve SNAP. And keep in mind that people sell SNAP cards all over the place. So the fraudsters, that these dead people that are claiming these dead people's benefits, they don't go to the grocery store and get groceries with SNAP for the most part. I'm not saying that they all don't. They go sell the cards on the market. All right, just the news. DOJ lawsuit accuses California of racial gerrymandering in its redistricting plan, which is true. All the Democratic redistricting, which is legal, the gerrymandering, which is legal, is illegally done by the Democrats because they do it on racial grounds. What they do is they try to take Republican districts and then stretch them and carve them out to include black districts, and the blacks historically vote Democrat. The Justice Department joined the suit, alleging the plan requires racially gerrymandered congressional districts in the violation of Equal Protections Clause of the 14th Amendment. And if you know what the 14th Amendment is, it's the one that guaranteed equality, voting rights, etc., for freed slaves. Zero Hedge. There are a couple charts from Zero Hedge here visualizing how the cost of living differs around the world. So we're talking about affordability. Let's look. So one of the most expensive places to live are some of the socialist places, of course. But the Western places to live. So why is this even interesting? Because we're talking about cost of living and affordability. You could go to Africa or India or South Asia. You could go to Myanmar or wherever, and you could see that the, cost of living is cheaper, so you could go there. The reason the cost of living is higher in Western countries is because the level of living is higher. So the middle class level, your cost of living is more because you get more. That's the whole point. I mean, and this is in the United States, you have some social safety net stuff, but also that's elevated to it's got a higher standard of living. So a higher standard of living is going to cost more, but you get stuff with that. You enjoy more stuff with that. Then it has the thing of the graph and all the different places. Most expensive places to live, Singapore and Hong Kong. Well, Singapore particularly, cost of living there, and Switzerland. U.S. is around in the middle. So U.S., Cayman Islands, I think is the most expensive place to live. Cheapest places to live, though, is Libya, right? Where they still have slavery in Libya. Pakistan, you can go to Pakistan. Afghanistan, India. You can go there. Affordability crisis. If you didn't know, you could, if you're on government assistance, if you're a U.S. citizen, you get government assistance, you could still get it in another country. The problem is they don't take SNAP. They don't take SNAP in Pakistan. And you can't get Section 8 in Pakistan either. More charts from Zero Hedge, visualizing the world's $111 trillion in government debt in one giant chart. And this is the reason affordability also is a problem. So all of this is, there you see the largest holder is the United States government, 34.5% of government debt. Canada has 2.3, Mexico has 10, India has 3, China has 17%, France 3.5, Italy 3.7. I mean, they have smaller economies. Japan is 8.9. They have smaller economies, so it just goes to show. But just to point out, we hold too much debt. We have 38 trillion, going on 38 trillion now of debt, and it's not sustainable. The reasoning is the debt service. It's $1 trillion a year that your tax dollars have to pay debtors that the U.S. government borrowed to do what? To pay people SNAP and to pay this and that and the other thing. Mostly unfunded liability lies in the social safety net. People would argue, oh, well, the military has a big budget, but that's not, the social safety net is bigger than the military budget. Regardless, the military budget isn't even $1 trillion. The biggest expenditure, what is the biggest expenditure? I think social programs are bigger than $1 trillion. I think it's 1 point something trillion. So cancellation is still on the horizon here. Daily Mail, New York City's hottest it girl actress is fired from movie and dropped by her agency for controversial Nick Fuentes agency. Dasha Nekrasova. She's got a podcast. I guess, and she put it out there on Instagram. And I guess she interviewed Nick Fuentes. I don't care. You can interview anybody you want. I don't care. The guy doesn't need a platform. So this woman, this woman has less followers than Nick Fuentes himself. So you're not platforming someone who doesn't have a platform. You're just interviewing a guy who's controversial. So again, it's cancel culture. It's a bunch of shit. You should be able to talk to whoever you want. I don't think she espoused these ideas, anti-Semitic or Tommy loving or whatever. Not that she shouldn't be allowed to, but I don't believe in cancel culture. I don't care what the fuck you say. If you're, and it's not cancel culture if you say something that your employer doesn't like publicly. And your employer's like, yeah, you're fired. But because you talk to somebody whose views your employer doesn't like, that's a different thing entirely. I mean, it's a fine line, but you can talk to whoever you want to talk to. It was the same thing why they called Tucker anti-Semitic, because he talked to Nick Fuentes, who I guess is anti-Semitic. I mean, whatever. People can have their views. You know, if you encourage people to be violent, that's a whole different story, but whatever. I'm not going to get it. The Federalist, Tennessee teacher who mocked Charlie Kirk's assassination got her job back. Well, here's a flip side of the fucking coin. After suspending her without pay in September, Williamson County School District now says Franklin, Tennessee high school science teacher Emily Orbison, who happens to be the daughter of Roy Orbison, her conduct, posting abhorrent comments celebrating conservative icon Charlie Kirk's assassination, did not justify employee discipline. Bullshit. This is murder. And so the problem is that, and we saw this in other states, is that you shouldn't be allowed to teach children, even high schoolers, your personal political opinions. So if you don't like someone, if you don't like Donald Trump, you can't go into class and go, fucking Donald Trump's a fucking scumbag. You can't do that. I think I missed the article here today. Before we get back into this, it's worth to have, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have a Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. That's a prudent deal. That's rational. That's a quote from Charlie Kirk, actually. But she said, and don't even get me started on the vile things that this POS said about women. My blood is boiling just recalling them, Orbison said. Reportedly, the granddaughter of rock and roll legend Roy Orbison raged, urging her followers, don't mourn his death. Just the price of doing business. Completely rational. Yeah, I don't agree with that, obviously. Political assassination shouldn't be tolerated at all, whether it's done by the government, the CIA, some nutbag. And I'm not going to go off on the assassination right now. What I did want to, because I realized just now when I'm looking at this, I read in the New York Times and I forwarded the article and it got lost in the shuffle somehow. It was about something similar. That somebody said something, it was about, I don't think it was it this case? I don't think it was this case. It was somebody else. Oh, it was a college, I believe it was a college lecturer. Was it University of Ohio? I'm not sure. It was at a university, there was a college lecturer, and she was lecturing about white supremacy, I guess. Right? And she had this pyramid, this chart that's been going around that had a MAGA hat and MAGA at the top of this white supremacy chart. And she would talk about covert and overt white supremacy. And then she has the audacity to say, well, we didn't prioritize MAGA on the chart. Yeah, you did. It was a pyramid. Pyramid is a chart of hierarchy, and you put MAGA at the top. And so one of her students complained to the dean, and the dean had her temporarily removed from this particular class, but she's still teaching other classes there. This mind virus has got to go. This idea that there's white supremacy, there's no white supremacy. People don't believe in white supremacy. They believe on meritus supremacy, a meritocracy. So whoever's better at doing something should reign supreme, I suppose. So whatever. It's not white supremacy. There's no, the funny thing they talk about is structural, right? Structural racism. There's nowhere is written down that the whites have to be supreme in any sort of political or business hierarchy. It just doesn't. And there are plenty of people in color who rise above through their merits, whether it's Barack Obama, that's questionable, obviously, but or Russell Simmons or any sports star or people in music. And the people in music don't even do that. And then they go into clothing brands and they know how to market and marketing and, you know, and they're big insurance companies that are run by all the executives are black. I mean, come on. There's no white supremacy. I'm not even saying that there isn't racists out there. I just inappropriate and unacceptable. The post outraged members of the community, including Williamson School Board. Let me be clear, the matter would be taken seriously and addressed promptly, but nothing happened to this woman. She got reinstated. National Review is the headline. Georgia Police Department recommits to inclusivity training after an officer misgenders a man using a women's bathroom. Police officer was put under investigation for allegedly misgendering a transgender identifying man who used a public women's bathroom. And he said, "Excuse me, sir." Next time you have to use the restroom, you're going to have to go into either the men's restroom or the family restroom. And a lot of the, see, like I said on Friday, if you could pass as a woman, then nobody's going to know the difference, right? But if you're a guy with a beard, an obvious man in a dress, and you go into the women's restroom, and you are in various states of undress outside of the stall, people should have issue with that, obviously. Because whatever. If you're in the stall, I could fucking care less, right? But that's not the problem. The people do that as shock value. You really have to use a public restroom, or are you just making a case? You know, most people don't like to use public restrooms, right? You go to the bathroom before you leave the house, and unless you have some sort of bladder problem, you know, you usually don't have to use public restrooms. But it's some sort of weird fetish, I guess. And so the cop gets in trouble, and now the DeKalb Police Department, they all have to go to inclusivity training. If you see a guy in a dress, better call him a ma'am, or else you're going to get in trouble. That's the problem with me. I decide what I call you. I do. Not you. That's the thing about compelled speech. You misgender? All right, I'll just call you a fucking asshole. Excuse me, fucking asshole. Next time you need to use the fucking bathroom. And this is the thing with society. And we have a lot to cover, so I just want to put this out there. The thing about living in society is to make a cohesive society, you have to be considerate. You have to use consideration. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Right? If you think your presence in a women's restroom is going to bother people, then why are you doing it? I guess the same could have applied to open carry, but whatever. Just the News has the headline, Wisconsin Democrat AG declared 2020 alternate electors for Trump weren't illegal, but then prosecuted the case anyway. Why is that? It's because the Wisconsin Justice Department initially concluded that the Trump 2020 re-election campaign's plan for alternate electors after losing the presidential race was not illegal. It's not, even though it's been prosecuted in Arizona. But after the U.S. Justice Department special counsel, Jack Smith, brought federal charges against Donald Trump, without basis, mind you, Wisconsin's Democratic Attorney General followed suit with charges against campaign members just ahead of Trump's successful 2024 re-election bid. And those people are still being charged. You can have alternate electors. The whole thing about January 6th was an issue because it stopped the legislators from issuing a pause in certifying the election, which would allow an investigation. And during that investigation, if malfeasance were found, that alternate electors could be considered. That's the whole point of the alternate electors, is because they represent the electorate. And the electorate were like, no, we're all Republican here. We didn't vote for Joe Biden. How is this possible? Democratic states rigging the election. PJ Media has the headline, from Soros grants to selective coverage, the drop site model. Now, drop site is another one because, medium and heavy and all these other news sites didn't really work. Drop site news arrived with the usual fanfare about integrity and independence, while its founders pitched themselves as renegades who answer to no one. Yeah. But once you follow the funding trail that keep the lights on, the image collapses because an independent outlet backed by powerful patrons isn't independent at all. It's another tool in the long line of ideological projects that try to shape American opinion while pretending to stand out influence they distribute. Stand outside the influence they distribute. That's what I mean. We're not biased. And that's the whole thing about journalism. Has to be objective. Everybody should be objective, but journalism should particularly be objective. But anytime you look at it, you got to understand that the truth is somewhere in between two points of view. A lot of people say the truth is always in the middle. It's not necessarily in the middle. It's between two different points of view. It could be one point of view could be more right than the other, but it's usually in between. The Open Society Foundation provided $250,000 grant that flowed through a fiscal sponsor to help establish Drop Site's Middle East desk, making it easier to advertise reader-funded purity while keeping donors in the shadows. Yeah. And what was the result? The result was reporting centered heavily on Gaza and Israel, featuring sympathetic interviews with leaders who engineered the October attacks, framing them as attempts at public understanding. There wasn't an attempt at objective journalism at all. It was simply the curation with intent. Curation of content with intent to influence one side. And the whole Hamas-Gaza thing is very complex, but not going to go down that rabbit hole. What we do have to concentrate on is the head of the snake. Wall Street Journal has the headline, the ultra-rich are spending a fortune to live in extreme privacy, to shun the general public. In Miami and elsewhere, the wealthy are moving in increasingly private spheres, shelling out big money to bypass the indignities of public life. They don't want to stand in line. They don't want to even be near the public. That anybody that could pose a danger to them or cough on them or that they don't have to smell them or whatever. They become increasingly isolated, and that isolation indeed makes them mentally ill to the point where they lose compassion for the general public. So why don't we just kill them all, right? Speaking of killing the public, let's move to some communism. This is the Washington Post, the editorial board. Seattle's coming socialist experiment. The mayor-elect has little experience, but plenty of bad ideas. The Washington Post? Katie Wilson, an activist with even less experience than New York's Zohran Mamdani, narrowly defeated incumbent mayor. She didn't really defeat him. It was rigged. Of Seattle earlier this month, the 43-year-old community organizer. Isn't that what Barack Obama did? Yeah. First-time candidate with no meaningful management experience will soon lead a city of around 800,000 residents with nearly 14,000 municipal employees and a budget of $8.9 million. Wow. Yeah, it's not an experiment. The American experiment is about freedom. That's what the American experiment is. Liberty. Right? And with freedom and liberty, there is a cost. The cost of tolerance. So not only are you free, but the person next to you is free to express themselves. So as I said before, a certain amount of consideration is needed in a free society. Like, morally, I don't agree with abortion, but I understand that other people who don't believe as me, want to be able to have one without having it illegally performed or what have you. To go on with the story, though, she depends on checks from her parents back east to cover expenses. To let them off the hook, she seeks to force residents of Seattle to pay for free, quote-unquote, child care and other goodies. Nothing's free in this world. 14 years ago, after working odd jobs as a barista, a baker, a lab technician, and a bartender, oh no, that's AOC, and a legal assistant, Wilson co-founded an advocacy group, called the Transit Riders Union to agitate for better public transportation paid for by newer and higher taxes. Yeah, she's fucked up. So she is a basement baby, she's a young person, relatively young, 43 years old, that still gets money from her parents. She lives in a one-room apartment with her husband and 2 kids or whatever. It's like, get a fucking job. That you're still depending on money from your parents, then you shouldn't have kids. If you can't afford to have kids, don't have kids. And the problem is what she's advocating for is for people that don't have rich parents back east, they could have the government as their parent. And the government could send them money if they have a lifestyle that they can't pay for. And that includes children. And I advocate for people having kids. But I didn't have kids, and it wasn't really because I couldn't afford them. But kids are very expensive. One kid is over his lifetime is going to cost you $1 million. It didn't work out for me. I got married late. We looked at adoption. That was a little too expensive. And we decided not to. Not to mention that the world is going to end in 10 years, but the prospect of a free and dignified existence is shrinking by the day. All right, One America News. New York City Mayor-elect Mamdani calls for Starbucks boycott amid nationwide workers' strike. I didn't boycott Starbucks today. I had my Starbucks. The problem is with the workers' strike, I was head of a union. I was head of my unit, the News Guild. And it's great when you want to negotiate contract. They supply the lawyers, unions supply the lawyers. They come there and negotiate with you. Striking is a very serious thing. Starbucks is one of the most sought after places to work because they treat their employees so well. They're very considerate of their employees. However, Starbucks, just another corporation like other corporations, and corporations are owned by shareholders. Shareholders want their dividends. So it's got to be a profitable company. Also, a barista, you know, you're going to learn to be a barista. Great. You should think about opening your own cafe, because then you can compete with your old corporate boss on a mom and pop shop, and maybe you can make a better espresso. Oh, I got something on it. What is that? I got some text out of place. Where are we here? We're already at an hour, so we're gonna have to finish up real quick, because I know I babble on and on about shit, and there's so much left to get through. So let's get through it pretty quick. Again with Mamdani, New York Post liberal polls, DSA, that's Democratic Socialists of America, warned Kathy Hochul to back Zoran Mamdani's agenda, free buses, etc., or get booted from the office. Third strike, you're out. So the socialists, the communists are flexing their political muscle given to them by people like Bernie Sanders, AOC, etc., thinking that this is the better way to go. And street thugs and street thuggery and all this stuff. So there you go, Democrats. There's no place for moderates. And Kathy Hochul really wasn't that moderate anyway. And, you know, all she did is question how you're going to pay for this shit. The state relies on transportation fees. Just the news, seizure of phone records became a pattern at the center of the grand conspiracy, weaponization case. The grand conspiracy isn't the grand conspiracy. The grand conspiracy is really international. It's the New World Order thing, but they call this case a grand conspiracy, and it's basically, there was a witness who claimed to have evidence on Hunter Biden's alleged misdeeds in Ukraine at his no-show corruption place there. And that instead of being rewarded for his whistleblowing, basically, he got investigated by Jack Smith and the Justice Department. He was investigating Democratic Party and deep state efforts ranging from ginning up the Trump-Russia collusion narrative to examining Smith's pursuit of Trump. The man originally bought the Hunter Biden evidence to the Justice Department. What was his name? Bud Cummings approached the Justice Department in 2018 on behalf of a foreign witness who claimed to have evidence of Joe Biden, a foreign witness, a Ukrainian witness, that Joe Biden exercised influence to protect his son's employer, that's Burisma in Ukraine, for a return of money for the family, which indeed happened. New York Post, I'm going to gloss over this. Missing 14-year-old girl found dead in RV behind her home. The problem with the guy, Arnold Rivera, 43, who killed a 14-year-old Kylie Doberman and probably raped her as well, was previously charged with burglary and criminal sexual abuse of a child between the ages of 9 and 16 in 2000. Both charges were dropped in a plea bargain. But then 30 months later, he was right back in court in 2008 and pleaded guilty to possessing a stolen vehicle. Career criminal, recidivist. Could have been stopped, but now this 14-year-old girl is dead. New York Post, Miranda Devine, FBI, Secret Service butchered the Thomas Crook case. We went over this already. That invited conspiracies. She doesn't delve into the fact that it was a conspiracy. It doesn't invite conspiracies. It was a conspiracy. Trump was set up to be shot, and this guy was the patsy. Whether he shot his rifle or didn't, we still don't have all the investigative evidence. And like I said before, he's dead. So there doesn't have to be an investigation. So they sit on the evidence that would have certainly enlightened the public to what exactly happened. What exactly happens? They find crazy, violent people online, and then they nudge them into doing something that will benefit the organizers of this politically. So I'm not going to get into it because we're out of time. Reuters, as Fed hawks press their case, traders bet against December cut. A lot of places, including Hammock, Logan, and Schmidt, signal preference for a policy hold. That means no rate cuts. Why would you want that? Traders at Rapid Shift now see 60% of chance of no December rate cut. And the Fed chair, Jerome Powell, said that it was unlikely. Mirren beats drum on rate cuts, sanguine on inflation. Right, we want a rate cut. That's what's holding the economy back, you fucks. New York Post, Succession actress Dasha Nekrasova dropped by talent agency. Oh, we went over that one already. Reuters, weapons makers have conned U.S. military into buying expensive equipment, Army Secretary says. We know this. Actually, the Army Secretary was on Face the Nation. It was an interesting interview, and actually Face the Nation, for the first time, I think, ever, had more conservative guests than Democrat liberal guests. So thank you, Barry Weiss, for making that shift happen. PJ Media, Rubio declares Venezuela's cartel de los Soles as a foreign terrorist organization. Trump speaks on next move. There won't be a war, but now Maduro says, I want to talk. Because we could just harass them endlessly until he caves or is ousted. So that was, the pressure's working there in Venezuela. In Saudi Arabia, no more foreign news. Too powerful to ignore. Saudi prince returns to Washington's embrace. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to visit the White House on Tuesday for the first time since 2018, when the killing of journalists by Saudi agents made him a pariah. People don't know what's going on here. There were several crown princes to take over for King Fahd on his death. Trump helped engineer MBS to take over, who is Western friendly and vowed to stop exporting Wahhabist militants that the former king and crown princes were doing at the behest of the CIA to create an enemy for the United States. So if you're worried about Islamic terrorism, the majority of it was planned by the United States and carried out by the Saudi government with the help of the Pakistanis in some places. The CIA built madrasas in Pakistan to teach these Wahhabists from Saudi Arabia at a very young age. To the goal is bringing jihad and killing Westerners. Just the News, January 6th panel cost twice previous estimates, hiring TV producer to dramatize attack, which they did. We all know is a insurrection. The Capitol, the House Select Committee that was run by Bernie Thompson. He sucked. Just off. In any case, it cost almost twice as much as previously reported. They had projected a $9.3 million committee cost, and it ballooned to up to $17.4 million of U.S. taxpayer dollars to pay for this sham, which was a gaslighting farce, to try to, smear and slander Donald Trump when it was nothing of the case. It was a political rally that was turned into a Fedsurrection, where federal agents were involved in the pipe bombing. Not only that, but they were trying to goad people into going to the Capitol, which of course is a crime. And then once in the Capitol, they made it act like, they were there tearing up the place, ready to kill and zip tie lawmakers, which that wasn't once they were in there, the MAGA people were like, what do we do? They just walked around for the most part. So if you didn't believe in chemtrails, Arab News reports Iran began cloud seeding operations as severe drought bites. Yep. Cloud seeding is chemtrails. I'm sure there's other weather modification that goes on also, but. NBC News, thousands protest crime and corruption in Mexico City as Gen Z protests gain momentum. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum accuses right-wing parties of trying to infiltrate the Gen Z movement and using bots on social media to increase attendance. Sounds like the Arab Spring, doesn't it? So Trump is using the tools of the intelligence department to that the intelligence department has used previously to oust or at least cause chaos, color revolution of sorts in Mexico. We don't know what the goal is there, if the Trump administration is heading that, or if this is some rogue element, but they're obviously out there to fan the flames of discontent. I'm sure some is legitimate and organic, but most of these things are synthetic, even in this country. LifeSite, lack of adequate health care, pushing Canadians toward assisted suicide. The family of an elderly man is speaking out about the terrible hospital conditions that led their father to request euthanasia. This is what socialized health care will offer you. You don't like the cane we give you? Then how about death? Reuters, Britain to make refugee status temporary under asylum law. This was from yesterday. Basically, what they're doing is the refugee wait for settlement is quadrupled to 20 years. The camera battery only lasts an hour. Labor government has been hardening its immigration policies. Above all, on illegal small boats crossing the English Channel from France. This is obviously an issue. The main issue, though, is the reason that they're hardening their stance on immigration is the Reform Party and other parties are using it, like Trump did, as a wedge issue to get more political support, because the citizens of Britain don't like the waves and waves of its legal immigration there, but still it has the same effect, whether it's illegal or illegal. In this country, it's illegal, and people don't like it because it's illegal because they voted against it. Our laws say that you don't have to do it. But in Britain, it's legal. The waves and waves of legal immigration is what's bothering people there. More from Reuters. China warns Japan of crushing defeat, tells Chinese citizens to shun visits. China on Friday warned Japan of a crushing military defeat if it uses its forces to intervene over Taiwan. More blustering and saber rattling, except this time with Japan. Reuters again, China Coast Guard ship formation sails through Japan-administered Senkaku Islands. There's been some tension over those islands for years. Because China thinks that the Senkaku Islands are theirs. It's part of Japan. National Review, Chinese-sponsored group pioneers new hacking tactic, AI-driven cyber warfare. This is new. So basically, I'll just give you the rundown. It's a hacking collective. Of course, they're not part of the the Chinese military. Of course, they're not. But everything out of China is run by the Chinese Communist Party. So they're calling it the GTG 1002 that used Anthropic's chatbot, Claude, to infiltrate for espionage purposes using Anthropic's Claude. Unprecedented hacking campaign infiltrating dozens of targets in the U.S. Well-resourced, professionally coordinated operation involving multiple simultaneously targeted intrusions. The humans involved with the attack largely acted in a supervisory role for Claude. The perpetrators manipulated Claude into performing the cyber attack. Claude was conducted an estimated 80 to 90% of the actual intrusions. New York Times, this is no way to rule a country. Guest essay by Eric Schmidt of Alphabet, Google. Albania uses algocracy using an algorithm, AI, to run its government. Eric Schmidt says that's not a bad idea. You shouldn't use just AI to run the government, but you should use AI to assist running the government. So we don't really have time to go through the whole kit and caboodle there. So we're going to leave it there for today because I think we're already over, right? Yeah, hour and 10 minutes. I've been running long, but there's always a lot to cover. So appreciate you joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, share the podcast. All right. So tomorrow I'll be back tomorrow, and every day Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. live stream. No Tuesdays with Perry this week. I've got a condo board meeting. I hate dealing with this shit. It's all to stop the increase in the HOAs. They keep wanting to spend money. Got to put a stop to it. There wasn't one man on the board, and all the women were liberal. And so you know what happens? The same thing. Condo board, government, whatever. They just want to keep spending money. So you got to get the money somewhere. So HOA is like a tax on the owners. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget you're under attack biologically and psychologically. So stay hip to that trick. I'll see you tomorrow. Respect.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
You can't handle the truth.
The New World Order.
You're crazy, man. You're crazy. I like you.